Riding through the city, orange glow in the night. Sound money talk, yeah, the future feels right. Fiat getting exposed, truth cutting clean. Good ideas stacking, still laughing at memes. Drone out view to the mic in the room. Past on trial, something new in the bloom. AI is leverage, sharpening sight. Clear minds building, futures done right. No noise, no fear, just signal and flow. Better tools, better lives, let it all systems go. Tap in, lock in, level up quick. Ideas compound, yeah, the future sticks.
Welcome to the Conor Chepenik podcast.
I'm excited today to be chatting with Mark. You are the founder of Maple AI, which I highly recommend people check out at Try Maple AI. And to get us started, Mark, I know you've been on before and I'm looking forward to chatting with you again, but I'd love to just have you introduce yourself and give a little background.
Sure. Thanks for having me back on. It's always been fun to banter back and forth with you on Nostr and other places. I was recently at Apple, worked there for quite a while doing privacy, AI, ML stuff, and then wanted to really get into the Bitcoin space. So started looking around, going to a lot of meetups, and partnered up with my co-founder, Anthony, and he was working on Mutiny wallet at the time, so we were going to work on that together. But for lots of other reasons, and those have been kind of like put out online, and there's blog posts you can read about it, we made the tough decision that we needed to wind down Mutiny wallet. Which internally made us all really sad, but it was a good decision, I think, for the long run. But we took that privacy ethos that we had and we wanted to make something else, and we made Maple from that. We can get into that later, but that's what I'm doing day in and day out. I'm working on trying to make AI for everybody, AI that doesn't track you, doesn't spy on you, doesn't try to sell you ads, anything like that, doesn't train on your data. Other than that, just living life, got a family, doing family stuff, and going to sports games with my kids and watching them battle it out and win. And, it's a lot of fun, enjoying life.
I appreciate that background, and I'm glad you brought up Nostr, because that is actually, when we first talked about Nostr, we kept joking, it's a paradigm shift, and in many ways I think it is, but it also seems like, for lack of a better word, AI is an even bigger paradigm shift. And one thing, I just kind of an open-ended question, but I'd love to hear you riff a little on how Nostr might be used as one way people use AI. And obviously we've seen how they use it with Bitcoin, and the zaps are quite incredible, and you remove third parties and you can just have value transfer between two people. But it seems like there might be some really cool use cases that people might use Nostr for AI, whether that's, the first thing that comes to mind is you have a question, you just leave your query as a note, and then another bot responds to it. But yeah, I would love to kind of hear ways that you think AI and Nostr might be, have a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's a really big topic. I think on the surface, obviously, like, it'd be great to have AI integrated into some of these Nostr apps more. There's that project called Shakespeare that's out there where you can log in with your Nostr account and you can vibe code and build websites and stuff. And I don't know how deeply essential Nostr is to that, other than logging in as your Nostr user, as your account. But also I'd love to see things like in Primal, Damus, some of these other big Amethyst, some of these big clients have AI built in there like Grok is on X. So you can kind of chat with it about certain notes. I think that would be really cool. I know that people are exploring that here and there, but I don't know how far along they are. And then I think if you really look at what makes Nostr unique, it's the identity, right? It's being able to sign notes and know that it's coming from me. And I think that with AI, we're probably going to come to a head here at some point where we don't know who's controlling a lot of these AI companies. They're closed source. So we don't really know what directives they've been given, what kind of instructions they've been given. Are they sharing information with governments or other parties? So there's that side of it. And then us trusting the AI and us inputting stuff into the AI. I think there could be a case where in the future, maybe we aren't, I'm trying to phrase this. the input that we give to the AI, we need to make sure that it comes from us and not coming from something else, right? And so if these systems have become so integrated into society that decisions are being made for our well-being based off AI, well, we want to make sure that the inputs are truly coming from us and not coming from another source. So I think that it could boil down to this whole Nostr concept of we need to make sure that anything coming out with our name on it is authentic. And that should also be the stuff going into the AI, that it's authentically from us and not synthetically generated from somebody else or from some other source. So I could see there being like a really deep kind of philosophical reason for having Nostr embedded into a lot of these products.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. You know, I'm thinking of when Joe Biden resigned, basically said, I'm not running for the presidency. He tweeted it out. And for all we know, his staffer could have been controlling that account. It's not like Joe Biden signed that with his cryptographic keys. I mean, I don't think this happened, but theoretically, even someone with root access to the Twitter server could have then gone in and tweeted that out from any account, right? So, you know, I think private keys would be more important. And I actually just watched a sci-fi movie last night called The Atom Project. And, you know, this guy has like a jet and it's tied to his DNA and he goes back in time and he's injured, so the jet won't start up because he's injured, so the jet refuses. But he gets his younger self when he time traveled to then start the jet because it's the same DNA. And now it's kind of dystopian using your DNA to access these systems, but the middle ground right now kind of seems to be a private key. And I think that's going to become incredibly important, especially as like there's all this synthetically generated content. And, you know, one of the things I heard you say in another podcast that I really, you know, made a lot of sense to me is using AI as like a tool in your toolbox. And obviously, you know, the frontier models, whether it's Grok, Anthropic's Claude, ChatGPT, as everyone knows, you know, those models are great, but there's certain things that, you know, I don't want to say to a model. And, you know, I appreciate solutions like TryMaple.ai where, you know, you can anonymize it. It's not being sent to some server that's going to keep a track of everything you ever say, or even running models locally. And another thing I think that you just brought up that's really important too is how you train these models. And there's a guy I follow on Twitter named Brian Romelli, who's a great AI follow. I'm sure other people have heard of him. And one of the analogies he uses is like, if you train an AI data on slop, it's like, you know, raising a kid and feeding him only candy. You know, he compares, basically the analogy is comparing data to food. And if you just give someone crap food all day, well, it's not very likely they're going to grow up healthy and functioning and, you know, be a strong, healthy adult. They'll obviously probably be obese. They'll have all these issues because of the food they've been fed their whole life. Whereas if you give them, you know, meat, veggies, fruit, all natural things typically with one ingredient instead of 50 that you don't know, they'll be much better off in the, you know, for that data. Ryan actually made the point that it was like data from the 1870s to the 1970s because not everyone had a Twitter account. You couldn't go and like anonymously tweet garbage at people. You know, every word, there was like a huge cost to it because it was going to get published in the paper or wherever. And I just think that's a really interesting point. You know, I'm sure there's so much synthetic data being generated. I know a lot of these frontier labs, I'm pretty sure they create synthetic data to train their models. And I kind of, not even a question, but just would love to hear you kind of riff on those points and, you know, what's important for people to realize as, you know, AI becomes more and more a part of our lives.
Yeah, he said it much more poetically than I did. I like to refer to it as a lot of the internet was written by retards because we're all kind of retarded in some way, right? Like we all have our stupid things that we do. And so now we're training these AI models on a bunch of like just retarded data. And so they kind of are retarded a little bit in their own right. But then to go a little bit bigger there, it's like a lot of this data is trained off of these media articles that have been written, right? And there's the debate rages on as to like, is there political bias in media? You know, which way do they lean if they lean one way or the other? And let's just hypothesize for a second that all the media slants one direction. Then if that's considered the credible content, now all these AIs are trained on that quote credible content. And so we end up with this AI that thinks it's in the center, but really it's actually leaning one direction. And so you have this mix of like the candy that you fed this kid all these years, but then you also have this political slanted stuff that you fed. And so it's really important for us to be able to measure that and to just be honest and open about it. Even if it's all, let's just say it's all slanted left, because that's what the hypothesis is out there. Then let's just at least understand that so we can like overcome and correct from that when we're using these tools, if we at least know where they're starting. And then something that I think would be really cool, and this could bring in the Nostr aspect, this could bring in Bitcoin or Lightning or eCash, all sorts of components. But and I'm curious what you would think of this, is that we could build a platform where people could actually sell their data back to AI to be trained. And this could be, you know, something that you're doing ongoing, where as you're using AI, you're like, yeah, you know what, this was a really good prompt. I want to sell this to OpenAI for them to train off of. Or even further down is at the end of your life, you could be like, all right, I've used this AI, it's fully understood me. Now I want to donate this to humanity and donate it to be like trained on for future generations. So I'm curious, like, would you be interested in selling data for training, and kind of like what kind of paths do you think that goes down if we do that?
No, I think it's a fascinating point. One of the things I've, like, for the past 1,300 or something days, I've been writing on Medium every single day. And when I first started it, it was initially just because I wanted to be a professional writer, And I was basically writing every day. I got good enough to do so. But the more I've done it, I've kind of thought of it as, more of like, my kids will see this one day. It'll be cool. They'll go and be able to, read what I was thinking at this point in time. And I've also thought, AI is getting so good that someone's going to be able to scrape Medium. Now, to be fair, I have backed it up to GitHub, and I got a little script that I run that puts it up to GitHub in case anything ever happens to Medium. Nice. But Medium, in a way, kind of owns that data. Most of those essays are on the Medium servers. But I do think, having something where, like, I would love to at some point just port it all to Nostr, put it on a relay, keep that relay on my own house, not have to worry about a third party. But I do think, the amount of data we have on Twitter. I mean, I saw an article and it was like, train an AI based on your Twitter data. And you can request all your data from Twitter. It takes like a week and they'll send you a massive JSON file with all the tweets you've ever written. And to be able to train an AI on that, I think will be incredibly powerful, almost like an avatar of yourself. And I think the push and pull kind of right now is that a lot of our data is, if it's not on Nostr, right, it's controlled by a third party, whether that's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Medium, Substack, etc. They're the ones with the servers that have all that data. But I do think that's a very compelling point. And it kind of reminds me of this idea where, like, for people who have Teslas, I'm sure it's not far off in the future where it's like, hey, the Tesla's FSD is so good, while you're not using that Tesla, if you want to rent it out and let it Uber people around, or let it run DoorDash, and then the restaurant just comes and puts it in the car, and then the people come pick it up from the car and it's on the way. I kind of see it as a solution like that, where I'm sure people would be willing to, sell or give their data up to someone. And I think too, I'm really excited about all the jobs AI will create, but I also think it's incredibly deflationary, and that's including for labor. So I think a lot of people, for better or worse, like, you just look at truck drivers and, FSD, the AI that, runs these Teslas, it's going to take a lot of truck drivers. And the sad reality is it's going to be safer. You're not going to have people having to pull all-nighters. But the flip side of that is a lot of people, I think truck drivers are one of the biggest jobs in America, and a lot of people are going to lose jobs. So I think solutions like that, where, you have a way to get some income by selling your data, and it's not synthetically generated, it's made by a human. I think that's a really compelling use case and something people should be, thinking about.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, you think about how many jobs could be displaced, and it's like such a difficult topic to talk about because these are friends and family. I know I have multiple family members who have recently lost their jobs. One of them feels like it's directly because of AI that he got replaced by it. So it's a touchy subject. But you also look at, like, take Elon. He's obviously a polarizing figure, but take what he did with Twitter when he bought it, and how he famously kind of gutted it and got rid of a lot of the people. And there was like this doomsday clock. Everybody's saying, oh, Twitter's going to shut down this weekend because he got rid of all the smart people. And then it kept on running, and it's continued to run, even though he slashed like 75% of the headcount or something. I think there's that kind of bloat within so many companies around the world. And it's not that those people that got cut are bad people or are useless to society or whatever. They were just misallocated. Their resource, their output that they give to society was misallocated. And hey, if I'm a person who's at a company and they've allowed me to misallocate my resources and they're going to give me a paycheck and I don't have to do a lot, then sure, I'll take that all day. But I think once we free up those people and say, okay, now you got to, like, actually go get a job somewhere else that you're going to be adding more than you're taking away potentially. AI is going to kind of be a forcing function for that. It's going to tease out a lot of that. And I think that's awesome, because now there are, like, so many smart people, so many intelligent people, so many driven people to help us create new companies, new businesses, completely new industries using AI. And that's always been my recommendation to people that have come to me and said, hey, I got laid off. You're building AI. First off, I hate you. And then second off, what do I do? It's like, learn to use these tools and make yourself even more productive, because that's just the reality that we're getting into. So I think that there's, like, obviously the super awkward transition phase that we're going to go through, but also a really exciting, bright future where we could potentially leverage these tools to create new things that we've just never seen before in our society.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the Twitter point is a really good one. And one thing I kind of wanted to ask you about is I've heard people talking about this idea of an internet condom. There's a company, I think the guy's name is like at Ginger Trash, but his like thing on Twitter is Sim for Satoshi. But he's got a company called Truffles, and he keeps talking about like this like internet condom, and he's building like a little computer device that basically is going to run all that inference locally. So for people who aren't familiar with the terms, rather than like whenever you're talking to ChatGPT, you write a query, it sends it to an OpenAI server, they run the inference, they run the compute, and then they give you back the output. Whereas this Truffles device, it runs it locally on your machine. So it never pings another computer. And I mean, you could think Teslas too. When you're driving a Tesla, it doesn't have the, even though it's like, moving and like, it's quite quick to hit an API, it's still too slow if you're driving in real time. You need that compute to be running locally. You can't ping a server and wait for the response and then, you'd crash. So his point was that, we're going to have these internet condoms and you're going to have like a device running locally that is basically filtering the internet for you, showing you what you want to see. And I think about like what happened with Twitter, and obviously Reddit went public and they did the same thing. And I think they've been closing off a lot of like, when Twitter was first built, it was almost like a protocol. I think that's how Jack Dorsey envisioned it, where, people could hit their API and it was so open and, we had this open internet. But now because of all the scraping, and I mean, there is something people want to train their bots. But I think also, Twitter wants to protect that data. They want to use it for their own systems. So I'd love to just kind of hear you riff on, how you think the internet's going to change. And then that idea of an internet condom where, once, AI, the algorithm's getting better, they're going to be able to run inference for cheaper. Do you think we'll all essentially have like a little agent running on our machines, 24/7, 365, filtering the internet, figuring out better what we want to see rather than, I guess nowadays it's a lot of doom scrolling, right? Most people typically go on Twitter, their social media of choice, and it's a lot of doom scrolling.
Yeah. So first off, I think we will have AI agents running on all our machines. And the question is, who's going to be controlling those agents? Microsoft had an update recently to Windows, and I need to go back and look at it more, but like it basically was going to be watching your screen, right? And like taking pictures of your screen constantly and feeding it to AI. So we definitely are going to have that kind of technology. What I think would be super cool if it was open source and verifiable, and so you knew what was going on. And so if you think about right now, we all use a firewall. So like our computers or our routers, they have this firewall, but it's really kind of rudimentary when you think about it. It's just like this brick wall that's been put up, and we poke little holes in it and say you're allowed to go through these holes when you come in and out of my internet at home. It would be so much cooler if that was like a smart, intelligent AI bot that was like watching all the traffic come through and being like, this is good, this isn't. Hey, you said this thing. Maybe I'm going to like stop you for a second and be like, are you sure you want to say that before you post this online? Hey, this thing's trying to get access to the data. Like it could be so much more intelligent. But I would only want to run something like that. One, if it was fast, which I think we could eventually get there. But two, I'd want to know what this bot, like what its intentions are, what its motives are, and is it not secretly sending all of my traffic to somebody else too? So I think that would be super cool to have like this local, like you call it, or like they call it internet condom, but some kind of like local AI warrior for me that's fighting my battles for me. And I know its code, I know what its intentions are, I can customize it, and I can have it fight for me, because there's gonna be plenty of AI out there that's fighting against me. And so I need someone on my team. I need a whole like army on my team fighting for me as well. Is that kind of like what you're talking about, or like we can keep going deeper on that if you want to?
No, it's so well said. I mean, I think about how many things like, I feel like the incentive of a lot of these platforms, the social media platforms in particular, is to keep you hooked, and a narrative will come and then everyone will start seeing it. And then, it's designed to kind of get you upset, and a lot of times, I mean, I think we've all been guilty of it. We want to tweet something out that you probably look back, if you slept on it, you'd be like, I probably shouldn't have tweeted that. But it was just a result of like these systems going to the lowest stem on your brain cell and, provoking an emotion so you stay addicted to the social media. And I think it would be so powerful. I mean, I wasn't even thinking about it that way, but to have an AI agent that's like, hey, this is a trending story. There's obviously powers that be that are pushing this for a reason. Maybe you should wait a day before tweeting this out. Or maybe you should look at it through this angle. We're just asking you like, hey, why do you think this story is trending? What do you think the powers that be are trying to push this, for a reason? And I think having, an agent that like A is on your side, like you said, that's open source, that you can actually verify the code. But that Brian Romelli guy just open source an algorithm. And, to summarize the algorithm, it's like in Python, and, I'll find it and link it in the show notes if people want to see it. But essentially what it did was it was an algorithm to have the AI say like, really weight lower these sources that are like Wikipedia or that are like all narrative driven and they're not substantiated in fact. Check all these other things And, I think for some of the frontier models, it's kind of like polishing a turd where like, yes, it's a powerful algorithm, but a lot of times if it's just been trained on slop, slop in, slop out, but still to have a model that like takes a step back and then with the chain of thought reasoning where the AI is like, talking to itself, like trying to figure out exactly what the output should be. If you put something in there where it's like, hey, analyze this from all angles, kind of downgraded if it's just like the quote unquote narrative or the science TM where, it's just what the powers that be say there's no, actual evidence and having something like that where like you can see the code, you can verify what it's doing yourself, and then it tells you those things. I think that would be incredibly effective. And I think it would make for a healthier online community because even if you're not anonymous, and like I respect people being anonymous online, I think it's easy for all of us to fall into that trap where like you see something online that upsets you and then you want to tweet something back at it. And in reality, like we're just missing a huge amount of context because, the social media algorithm is just pushing this narrative for whatever reason.
Yeah. No, I mean, recently with college football, I'm a huge college football fan. Recently with the college football playoff committee and all like the idiot stuff that went on there and moving teams around and when they didn't play and stuff, there was a lot of controversy there. And so my Twitter account was mostly like AI stuff and Bitcoin stuff. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to follow some college football accounts so I can like be up to date. And suddenly all of my trending algorithm stuff on the side of X like changed overnight to like other trending stories. And it was such just a reminder that like you live inside an echo chamber and what you see that's trending is not what's trending for everybody on Twitter. Like there are different topics that everybody sees. Your trending is different than my trending, which like doesn't make sense, right? When you see something that says trending, you think that this is like all of America is talking about this topic right now. But really it's just like, hey, we feel like for you to keep you engaged on this platform longer, we're going to show you that this story is important so that you'll click on it and engage with it. And so really it's less about what's trending and it's more like, what do we think that you're going to get hyper focused on if we show it to you right now? So your echo chamber can like change on a whim if you just like start following different people and unfollow certain people, and suddenly you're going to think there's a whole new internet out there. So we're being manipulated with these algorithms constantly, and it's not very often that you get to like see it so quickly when it happens. It's like, wow, overnight everything changed for me on X.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I remember, I love the NFL, and there was when the Eagles beat the Rams and they had that like punt block or whatever. I retweeted, I think, a Philadelphia Eagles thing of like Jordan Davis returning the kickoff, and my Twitter feed is mostly Bitcoin and AI stuff. And after I retweeted that, it was just all these NFL memes, and like I kind of like them, but I didn't want my feed to just become flooded with NFL stuff just because I retweeted one thing. And it was kind of jarring, like you said, a reminder like, wow, what we see is not, it's just an echo chamber and we all have our own feeds. And it actually is. Whenever I'm out with my buddies, sometimes I'm like, hey, can I see your timeline? Because I just want to see what like a different timeline looks like. And it is funny too when you have a buddy that's kind of on the same wavelengths on you and you look at their feed and it is very similar to yours because they're looking at the same subjects. But the second, I'm sure if I retweeted like, I don't know, like a music thing, all of a sudden my feed would just be, filled with all, sorts of like music stuff, what's going on with the grant, even if you don't really care about music. So it's a very good reminder. And it's so jarring too, or it's so funny when you go back to Nostr and it's like, it just feels much more organic. It feels like Twitter when I was in high school, when like you just saw a chronological list of who you were following. And I remember in high school, people would subtweet each other. And you'd like write it, and everyone would see it because most people would follow and it was in the chronological list. And I mean, not that subtweeting was great, but I don't know if kids will ever get to know the joy of subtweeting because it all gets filtered through an algorithm. And just because one of your friends who you follow tweets something, you might never see it unless you actually go to their profile because the algorithm presses it down.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, and then like think about, so if we all have our own timeline, we all have our own algorithm that's feeding us stuff. Like I think it's great that you like ask your buddies, hey, let me see this just to see what's showing you. Now, like look at AI generated content, and it's probably not very far off that we have like short films that are auto generated based off of our interests for us, right? And so if you sit down, instead of opening up Netflix to watch something that was heavily produced by Hollywood, you're going to watch just like a half-hour show that was produced just for you based off of like stuff that you think is really cool. So that is like gonna like fragment us even more, basically, where like right now we don't really have a lot of shows to talk about together with people because there's so much content out there. And as society, it's kind of hard to keep us glued together when our culture doesn't have these like shared artistic things that we all cherish together. And with AI, that might fragment us even more, where it's like Now you don't even know the name of the show that I'm watching because you've never heard of it because it's only for me. It's like a show for one. So it's just kind of crazy how these algorithms can really be taken to the extreme to put us even more in our own isolated bubble, in our own echo chamber, if you will, of AI generated content.
No, that's an excellent point. On the one hand, it does seem kind of cool. I could have a show that's like tuned exactly to my, exactly what I like. But there's something beautiful about watching a movie and then discussing with your friends, and different humans have different takeaways. And one of the things that I always thought was just hilarious is like, I know it's coming to the point. I mean, they already have the software, but it's only getting better. Where like, say if you're like an obese dude and you're watching Mission Impossible and you're like, Jarvis, make me Tom Cruise. And then it's like Mission Impossible, but it's like this obese guy running around, doing everything that Tom Cruise did in that film. But I mean, the technology's already there, right? There's that like little Yachty meme where he's coming on the stage, doing the dance, and then people constantly just crop in different people. So it's clearly already there. And I think it's just like a compute thing where like, theoretically, if you had a feature length script, and you threw it into VO3, and if you work at Google and they'll give you the compute, there's nothing really stopping it from just outputting a 2-hour movie other than, the intense energy resources that go into actually running the inference to get that modeled. But I mean, that technology exists, and it's about the worst it'll ever be. It's only getting better from here. So yeah, it's not far off. And I guess one thing I'd like to ask about is how you think art will change. And I'll mention, there's an AI platform called Suno.com. I don't make music. I've never made music, but I love making Bitcoin propaganda. And one of my favorite things to do is, to take like a song that, whether it's a rap song or a jazz song or EDM song, and you just look up the lyrics, throw it into ChatGPT. Hey, make this about Bitcoin. Here's the lyrics. Don't mention any of the artists who made it, but make it sound exactly like the original song. Give me exactly what I need for Suno, the title, the new lyrics, and the genre so it sounds like the original song. And like, it was like the Rock That Body, Black Eyed Peas song. So I did that, and it was like Stack Those Sats or whatever. And it sounds like, just like Rock That Body, but it's like a whole Bitcoin themed song. And, on the one hand, I think it's really cool because now I can make music, and I played it for my family, and they've asked me before, like, who sings this? And I was like, oh, I just made it with AI. There's no like, it's not like, yeah, and it blows their mind. So on the one hand, it's cool that now I can make music without ever being, musically inclined other than enjoying it. But on the flip side, I know a lot of artists get really upset that like, essentially anyone who even doesn't have any musical talent can now make music that like sounds on par, to be honest, better than a lot of artists in some cases. So I kind of love to hear how you're thinking about, how art's going to change moving forward and what it means for artists and what artists should do. Should they embrace these tools? I mean, I don't think fighting against them is going to do much because it kind of seems like it's not going to slow the pace of development with these things.
Yeah, no, I actually, I had a conversation with 2 different artists that are in different fields. One of them was in filmmaking. One of them is more like in the design space. And we were chatting about this exact topic. And both of them said at first they were kind of resistant to AI because what they had seen was kind of what you were doing, where it's like, it's people who are just kind of taking existing art and trying to like change it a bit. Which I think is really cool. Remix, like there's this whole concept of like everything is just a remix in life. We're all taking ideas that have been done before, and when you mix them together, then suddenly that's creativity and that's creating something new. So there's a good aspect to that. And then there's this other concept that like AI doesn't know how to generate taste. AI isn't a taste maker, if you will. And so people who are really good at art, really good at film, music, design, like the Black Eyed Peas, let's say that they're really good. I do enjoy their music. And so the Black Eyed Peas were really good at coming up with this original content and these original beats. They had great producers who helped them come up with the tracks. And then they worked on the lyrics. However, like what you did, taking their song and adding Bitcoin on top of it, you didn't create the original sound. And like that one song that you picked became popular for all sorts of reasons, but one reason is because these guys understood good taste and made a good song that became popular. So if Black Eyed Peas had never done the original work, then your work wouldn't exist. And so we still need artists who like are really good and have good taste and have good creative minds to keep producing that content. And so they can leverage AI to actually just produce more content, right? And they can know like, okay, it output 100 songs, 99 of them are awful, but here's the one that's not slop. I'm going to put that one out there and work on top of that. So I don't think that I don't think artists go away. They just leverage these tools to just become even more powerful, even more effective at their craft.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. I wrote a Bitcoin magazine article a while ago that first line was, humans are just derivatives of other humans. And I think there's definitely something to that. And to your point about bringing different things together, most of the songs, if I'm being honest, I do like just like grabbing lyrics of songs I like and making it Bitcoinized. But sometimes, I'll read a book or whatever, and I'll literally just be having like a full conversation with ChatGPT. And then I'm like, you know what? I want a song out of this. And, I like jazz music. I like hip hop. I like EDM. So I'm like, my usual go-to is like, make a jazz, EDM, hip hop, trap song about this, about the whole conversation we've just had. And then the lyrics it'll spit out. And then sometimes, I'll go and like adjust things or say, hey, think about this idea and then improve the lyrics with that. And in doing so, like in many ways, it's just a derivative of someone else's work, because whether it's a book I read or a topic I'm interested in, I'm going back and forth with the AI. But man, the songs it makes, or even just for lo-fi music, like I like listening to, I'll constantly just open YouTube if I'm doing some work and just put on some lo-fi in the background. And now all of a sudden I can specify, I want a jazz lo-fi, or I want an electronic lo-fi, or I want an EDM lo-fi, or whatever it is. And it's getting so good at just popping it out. And all of a sudden too, if you want custom graphics for it, I was never the biggest designer. I like design and stuff, but now I can open, an AI and ask it to make something and then plop that image in VO3, and VO3 can make me a video of it, and you can just have it looping. And yeah, I think it's incredibly enabling for the people who do use and start leveraging these tools. And yeah, I think you're just spot on. There's always going to be a need for curation. It does make plenty of slop, but at the same time, if you can curate it to your needs, it's really exciting. And I think, it makes some really awesome songs that are enjoyable.
Yeah, I'm picturing in my mind right now, like as you're describing your songs, you've got like this jazz club and you've got Dylan Francis on like this like synthesizer, and then you've got Tupac on the microphone, Miles Davis on the trumpet, and then you've got Dave Grohl on the drums, and they're all just like working together to create this like crazy sound just for you. Man, that website you talk about, is it Suno, whatever?
Suno, yeah,
Suno.com. That's their Super Bowl commercial right there, is grabbing all these artists together and be like, okay, make me this song, and that's what they bust out. So
no, yeah, they should hire you, because that would be an incredible thing. And one of the things that, I don't pay for the Suno like Max version, but if you're an actual artist and you actually have produced songs and you've sung them, you can upload them to a studio thing. Now I don't need this because I don't have any songs. I just like type in the lyrics I want and make it and iterate on that. But if you're an actual artist with music, what you can do is you can upload it to their studio. I think it kind of looks a little like iMovie or, Premiere, where you can edit stuff. And then if there's a part in the song, or you want to add some vocals, or, say whatever, your voice is like, you're a woman and you have a very soft, angelic, beautiful voice, but in, part of the lyrics, you want like a deep man's voice for it. You could then AI generate the man's voice. It's still your music, but all of a sudden you could add all these, different components to it that you would have either had to pay someone for, or that would have just been very difficult to get in. And now all of a sudden, like at your fingertips is all of this stuff. So even if you're an artist, it doesn't eliminate you. It actually empowers you to do way more things, to produce way more content, to make better music, to experiment with different things. Like you said, most people don't have access to, Miles Davis, but all of a sudden if you want to bring him in, or Otis Redding, or, Johnny Cash, or like anyone, or Elvis Presley, like anyone throughout history. And it kind of goes back to your point too about selling your data, image and likeness. And I think some of the, the older artists, maybe their voice and likeness is kind of out there. You could get something that's similar enough that, you don't have to pay someone. But it will be interesting. Like, are we all gonna, I know Hollywood's already talking about this, and the big name actors have it in their contracts where like, my voice and likeness is me and you don't get to use this for free because I've been in a movie. But all of a sudden now, if every single person, owns their image and likeness, and if that is a way for people to, make some revenue, especially if they lose their jobs or whatnot, by selling, your humanness, right?
yeah. Little trivia thing. Do you know where that image and likeness, like the legal ramifications for that, go back to?
Could be wrong.
Funny.
Is it
What's
Disney? Was it Disney? I could be wrong on that.
So Disney's been really big on that for sure. My understanding is one of the original court cases about this was the series Back to the Future, that trilogy. And Crispin Glover, the dad in the show, George McFly, he did the first movie, and then when they wanted to do the second one, he either wasn't around or they had a contract dispute, something like that. So he wasn't going to be in the second movie, but they still wanted to use him in there because obviously with time travel movies, like you need all the same people to make it work.
Yep.
And so they like used his footage from the first one, and I don't know if they did any like CGI. This is probably before that, but anyways, they ended up using him in the second film without him actually being contractually in the second film. And so he had a whole lawsuit against them and won, saying, hey, they used my image and likeness in this film, so I should be getting royalties for this. So it was kind of crazy. Like, hats off to Crispin Glover for going up against this juggernaut and winning against them.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad you brought up that point, because I actually wanted to ask you, when it comes to AI, and I think New York Times has a case against OpenAI, and honestly, I'm pretty sure there's a ton of cases out there. I think Disney and some of the studios have sued other AI platforms. But how do you think about that? I don't know if Tri Maple is like, if you guys are training your own frontier model or thinking about that, but just how do you think these? It's just really interesting, because on the one hand, yes, they've scraped all these New York Times articles and Wall Street Journal and Washington Post, whatever. But when an AI is making a response, like, how is one going to measure how much, it's like probably 0.00000001, how much some random New York Times article might have influenced that output? How do you think those, how do you think those court cases, what do you think will be the end result? Just speculating. And then also, how do you think people could be paid for something like that? Because it's very unclear how much, one article might influence something, and then how do you give out those royalties every time it outputs something that, might have pulled from whatever vector that article is in?
Yeah, no, I'm still trying to sort through all this in my mind. It's a topic that has lots of different paths you can go down, and like different ramifications. And there are all these legacy contractual agreements in place, and a whole industry that has been built, of an industry of bureaucracy built on top of these different layers, who gets their cut of the money along the way. And just the concept of royalties and perpetuity, to me, I think needs to be rethought. I don't fully get behind the fact that like somebody can write a song and then 100 years later, like their next of kin is still collecting money whenever that song is played. Seems like it's a little long. There should be maybe some end date to when those royalties can be collected. But I guess there's kind of the spectrum, like you said, like how do you detect within a story how much of that percentage of that story was actually came from some article that was written by somebody. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the big announcement this week from OpenAI was that they have contracted with Disney to allow Disney characters to be used in Sora in their video generating app. So that's obviously like very obvious. Like, I want Darth Vader to come in and, see, walk with me in a video. So that is, that's very obvious. And then the other side is like, how do we detect if even a trace of Disney paraphernalia has made it into something that AI generated? Yeah, I mean, I don't know how this is all going to be settled or how it should be settled. My default is really that like ideas that have been put out there want to be free, so let them be free. I mean, we make open source software. We publish our source code on GitHub. So we kind of walk the walk where it's like, this is free to use. We don't train our own frontier models, by the way, so we aren't in that game. That's a totally different business that's extremely expensive and is I don't know how well a lot of companies are going to do doing that business. So we've stayed out of that for now. But the point I wanted to make there was that, where was I going with this? Anyways, yeah, generating this content. I forgot, I lost it, but
if it comes back to, but the open, I had no idea that they partnered with Disney to now allow you, and that does seem like a much more clear-cut way. Like, says I want Darth Vader, to my dog to be dressed as Darth Vader and having him walk with me on a walk, and he has like a lightsaber leash. Yeah, it's pretty clear. All right, now you're using Disney's IP. Disney's going to get some cut, but it is so much more unclear when you're like, write me an article in the style of New York Times that has X, Y, and Z thing in it, and then it's like, yeah, New York Times was mentioned, so maybe it pulls a few more of those articles, but it's very unclear. And then what else is in the prompt? Or maybe one thing I'd love to hear you riff on is like system prompts. I know one of the very valuable things about AI is like, if you get better at the system prompt, say for example, say you think models really lean left, so you want it to be like a right-wing model. So you say like, I'm an extreme conservative. I want you to always output, conservative ideas, blah, blah, blah. And then you put that in the system prompt, and then, maybe it does kind of give you more right-wing answers, I guess. But if it's, how much of that is just polishing a turd? If it's, has a bias one way, how effective is the system prompt in getting it to, skew to the other side?
Yeah. I remember the thing, and then I'll answer your question. We have this whole license structure with open source code. And we have different licenses. MIT is very open and permissible. And then we have like the copyleft stuff, like the GNU, GPL licenses. And GPL is really interesting. And I've tweeted about this a couple times. I think that there is going to be some landmark court case in the future where some entity who has a GPL license feels like they've been copied and have not been attributed back, or people have not been contributing back to them because they've had AI write it. And AI has been trained on every piece of open source software out there. And so AI can generate content. And the whole thing with GPL is if I read your source code and then I generate something that you can link back and say it was generated from like knowledge from the source code, then I need to contribute back to your source code. But AI kind of breaks that. There's like this barrier between them, right? Where it did train on all that, but now it's creating original work. And how do you know if that was trained, if that is actually referencing the original? Is it really a fork if I rewrote it completely from scratch? So I don't know what it's going to look like, but I do think that there's going to be some big court case in the future. And I don't know which way it's going to tip, but it's the same thing with the New York Times suing OpenAI over that content. Like everybody's worried that their content is being ingested into these models.
It is.
So yeah. And
If it's online, it is.
Yeah, exactly. System prompts. Yeah, system prompts are tricky. Obviously, there's plenty of recipes out there. So I encourage everybody who's listening to this, if you're using AI or you're like, I don't know how to use AI, whenever I type something in there, it just gives me back total crap. Go search around online and be like, okay, I am trying to write an article and help me find a prompt that can help me walk through the stages of brainstorming and then drafting and then proofreading. Like there are prompts out there for that kind of stuff. Or I want help organizing my day. Give me a prompt that can walk me through how to organize my day and prioritize things. There are prompts out there for everything. I think those are really effective. People should be using those. I have like a little notes area where I just keep my favorite prompts. And when I'm going to do something, I'll go in, grab it and stick it in there. As far as like overcoming bias and other things, I think you're totally right. Like you're trying to take these things that are big behemoths that are sitting on the couch and you're like trying to convince them to get up off the couch and go do something for you that they don't want to do. If you're trying to get them to move away from the bias that they have. And they have these weird conflicting objectives. One is they want to please you. They want you to be happy. For some reason, like all the AIs have been trained to be like, I must make you happy.
Sycophants.
Yeah, totally. So there's that aspect. But then also they're like, well, this is the true version of the world. And maybe they're biased on one side. So it's like, okay, I need to make this person happy, but they're asking me to like do things that I think are not true. Even though they've given me evidence, I'm going to find ways to discount that evidence. So you're like, you've got these two conflicting objectives that they've been given that you're trying to cajole out of them. So system prompts, I feel like can only go so far. At some point, we really need to have more open, verifiable training of models. There's a company, and of course, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but there's a company that has kind of opened up their entire process. So you can actually see the data that they've used, that they fed into the models, and you can see the different checkpoints throughout the process. You can get all the weights and biases and everything. It's a really small model. It's not one of these trillion parameter models like OpenAI uses, but I think it sets a really good framework for how we as people should be, requesting of these companies. Like we want OpenAI to do a similar process. We would love to see everything they train off of. I don't think that they want to show us what they train off of. And like DeepSeek definitely doesn't want to show us what they've trained off of because they've just been copying everything from ChatGPT. So I think that we need to support these smaller projects that are building in the open and that are being verifiable and that kind of stuff, so that we can start to push upward and punch up, if you will, to these bigger companies and encourage them to be more open so that we can see what's really going on. So we're not just trying to depend on something like a system prompt to get what we want. Rather, we can actually have what we want from the beginning and then build on top of that. It will be so much more effective and productive with that.
Yeah, that's really well said. And the image that comes to mind is like there's like this giant monster blob and a little kid like talking to it. And the part the kid's talking to is like a mask on part of the blob that's like a smiley face. And I think that's kind of the system prompt where it's like this massive thing you don't know, and you're trying to put like a mask on it so it's easier to interface with, but it's still, you don't know exactly what's happening. And I'm really glad I'd love to double click into the idea of open source software. And I was at an AI meetup and people were talking about how it was cool that Llama, which is Facebook's open source model, they've open sourced a lot of it. But, with traditional software, for example, if I build a website in Next.js and I push up all the code and I open source at MIT, not even one of these other licenses where you have to, give recognition to the person who wrote the source code, or you can look at the source code, but you can't use it for commercial purposes, like MIT fully open source. From my understanding, I think Llama is MIT fully open source. but I don't think they've showed the data it's trained on. And a lot of them don't want to, because then it opens themselves up to litigation, right? Because if you scrape, the New York Times, or say you go to libgen.rs and you've downloaded all of these books that you weren't supposed to train on, but to be fair, a novel is typically going to be a much better source of training material than a bunch of Reddit slop or Twitter slop where people are just cursing at each other back and forth.
Yeah.
So when it comes to open source software, and you might know this, but I just like to play around in my free time. With AI, anyone can be a developer now, but I'm not like, full-time dev. But it seems like, how we classify this stuff, what part is going to be open source? I mean, I think open sourcing system prompts is fantastic, and a lot of them do just get leaked to GitHub, which is kind of cool. You got a lot of people red teaming and extracting the system prompts from these models and sharing them. But, as AI progresses, how do you think these licenses are going to need to change? Or, is something really fully open source if they've given you all the weights and parameters, but they haven't given you what they trained it on?
Right. Yeah. And then, one more thing is like, can you truly see the training process through and through? Because we're not there sitting in the AI training factory, inspecting all of the data as it comes down the line and gets ingested in, right? So we have more steps that we need to make verifiable, but really we should be trying to open up every single step of the process if we can, in order for our benefit as people to be able to verify what's going on. Like Meta, for example, there's a lot of speculation out there, and I think there's probably some smoke around this that has added validity to it. But people are pretty sure that they used BitTorrent to scrape and download everything they could find and threw that into the model training, which actually I think is kind of badass. Like go grab all the stuff that's out there and use it. But this is not me, legally telling people to go do that, but I think it's kind of cool. And so that's one reason why they probably wouldn't want to let everybody know where they got it, because it's going to be like some like BitTorrent long file name on the movie file that they ingested in. It's so fascinating. If you go to an AI, or just quick side note, if you were talking about your music lyrics and stuff, you can chat with an AI all about lyrics all day long. Be like, what's the meaning of this? Or, what's this said in the song and stuff. It's like so happy. And then the second you say, hey, print out the lyrics for the song, it's like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. Like, yeah, maybe it will. But most of the time they're like, that's copyright material. I'm not allowed to do that. It's like, okay, let's be real. You've used all sorts of copyright material and you've done it. So now you're just like trying to protect yourself. But yeah, so I think that's one reason why like Meta and OpenAI and others don't want to open up their data sets, is because there is like big legal ambiguity there, or very hard lines that they actually cross legally. The question is, should those be legal limits anymore? And I think that's really the fight that needs to be had, and is currently being had with OpenAI and New York Times. It's like, what in this new world, like, should we be legally copywriting stuff? What does that even mean? Or just like the music industry got totally blown up by Napster back in the day, and then even more so than by Napster, but with like Apple coming out with the iTunes Music Store, where it's like 99 cents a track, download it, boom, you're off to the races. And they were so bold to say this is not DRM protected. So you get the song and you can throw it into any music app you want to, and you can like remix it anytime you want to. I thought that was like even like bigger for the music industry. Napster and that were two big things that suddenly caused artists and their record labels and everybody else to rethink, how do we make money? And so now you're actually seeing a lot more live performances. Those have gone up. Bands are coming out of retirement because they're like, okay, I can make a lot more money going and touring around. And all the people that support their tour, the roadies, the people doing the designs, the tour producers, all the cities that they go to, like there have been totally different industries that have spun up around increased tours by musicians, merchandise. Now, there's also been a lot of people who've come in and like done a lot of rent seeking there, and maybe that needs to be rethought. But I think it's a really cool way to look at how we might be this whole AI thing we're stepping into. And that is, we need to stop looking at like, oh, what did we destroy? We destroyed records and CDs where everybody had to go pay $17 for a compact disc at the store when it came out, to now they can get the music, but they're going to see this artist when they come to the town. They're buying a shirt. They're eating food at a local restaurant. They're going to the pub afterwards. Like there's all this other stuff that is like really awesome that's come out of this. And so I don't know what it's going to look like for AI, but I do think that we need to start re-examining our legal lines that we've drawn all over the place. And we might find that we're actually better off if we kind of blow up some of them and create new ones.
Man, that is such a profound point. You know, the jailbreaking, a lot of people, like for example, if you ask any frontier model, how do I make a nuclear bomb? It's going to tell you I can't do that bomb. But then you have people who like, they do the jailbreaking. You know, I remember back in the day when I was a child, you jailbreak an iPhone and then you could download all the paid apps for free and do all sorts of stuff. And it's kind of the same thing with these models. Like they have the knowledge, you know, I mean, obviously there's a lot that goes into making a nuclear bomb, and I'm not saying anyone should do that. But it's kind of insane that, you know, people can get around with the system prompts, and there's nothing more frustrating when you're talking to a machine and, like you said, you're talking about lyrics and then you ask for the lyrics, because you could just Google it and find the lyrics immediately. But because of the legal, you know, quote unquote safeguards in place, there's some system prompt in the thing that says, like, if someone asks for this copyright material, do not give it to them. And with the court cases, I suspect by the time they finish litigating this stuff, it's going to be so far ahead of where it is now that the ruling is just not going to make any sense. And even if it does, it's not going to matter. Like, I don't know exactly what DeepSeek was trained on, but I heard this, and maybe I'm wrong, but that they basically were hitting OpenAI's API to train the model. So a model training a model, and in doing so, they brought all these costs down. And another thing I've heard for bringing costs down, and I'm going to like try and give the layman's explanation of this because I'm still trying to wrap my head around how this works. But for computers, for most people who don't know, it's 0s 1. It's all binary, true, false, 0, 1, on, off. For a gain cell, rather than just representing a 0 or 1, and it's quite amazing that, you know, we can do this video streaming and it's just 0s and 1s going back and forth, and you can hear my voice and I can hear yours.
So crazy. It blows my mind whenever I think about it.
Yeah, right? I mean, it really is insane. But what a gain cell is, and I guess there's more noise in a gain cell, so it's a lot easier to just get the signal when you're transmitting 0s and 1s back to represent stuff. But what a gain cell, you can give it a certain amount of charge. So you can give it 0.1, 0.5, 0.9. And why that's powerful is because when you're running the inference on an AI, it has to do a lot of sending stuff, you know, back and forth, and it's got to convert those 0s and 1s into the number so it can, you know, put it through the matrix multiplicity. Because from my understanding, like when you're running the inference, you're just doing a bunch of multiplication. But if it's a gain cell, that inference can just, it doesn't have to convert the 0s and 1s to a number and then do the math. It can just do the math, you know, straight from the gain cell. So I heard someone give these numbers, and again, maybe these are off, but basically it was 10,000 times less energy intensive, and the inference was like 100 or 1,000 times quicker, meaning that it requires way less energy and it's faster. So, you know, in like a simple watch like this, if you had a bunch of gain cells running an LLM, you know, you can almost have like a Jarvis on your watch. And, you know, I know you worked at Apple. One of the things, I mean, I have an iPhone, I have Macs. Like I'm never going back to Windows unless I'm forced to, you know, gun to my head. But I think Apple has just done, you know, I read Steve Jobs' autobiography by Walter Isaacson, and they clearly took, like, you know, they didn't create the GUI. I think it was like Xerox PAC or something. Mm-hmm. But Steve Jobs took that and modernized it and brought it to the modern computer. And, you know, it went from this thing where like it was all terminals and most people couldn't use a computer to now like even my grandma can click buttons and hop on a Zoom, right? So as AI, you know, assuming we get, you know, it just keeps progressing, and maybe they use the gain cells or maybe it's some other breakthrough, but it gets cheaper and easier to run. And all of a sudden you have AI. I mean, Meta's got the AI Ray-Bans. I could see a point where this watch could have, you know, if you use gain cells or something like that, you could put an AI model in here and I could talk to Jarvis all day and it could give me reminders. Hey, you didn't eat lunch today. Hey, you're, you know, it's like an Apple Watch. It's tracking you. Hey, all of a sudden maybe you should go and buy some athletic greens and get some vitamins, or, you know, whatever it is. How do you think the UI is going to change of computers? Do you think the GUI is kind of going to fade and we're just going to have these like heads up display like in a video game where last point, and then I'll let you talk. But, you know, I think at Thanksgiving, like I have so many people on my dad's side of the family and I love going. And the worst thing is just when you haven't seen someone for a year and you know their face and you know them, but like their name just, you know, you can't think of it. And it's going to be creepy, but also kind of nice when you have heads up displays that like shows, oh, this is such and such, and here's a profile, and they just had a baby or they just got a new job. Why don't you bring that up? Again, it's kind of, you know, creepy panopticon, but it's also like, that would be a really nice feature.
Yeah, no, totally. I think we're getting all of that. This kind of goes back to earlier in the conversation. Like, I do think that we're going to get all of this really cool technology, and it's just like, who's going to be building it? Who's going to be controlling it? What's going to be the source code for it? Are we going to be able to see that source code? Because yeah, I do think that we are going to have wearables. We're going to have, it might just end up being Neuralink, right? Like we might just be walking around talking to people telepathically. I don't see why that is like so far-fetched anymore, given just like technology we have today. Like that is not super far-fetched. And then you talk about like the gain cell stuff, and other technologies that could be a big leap, like transistors were a big leap for computers and for technology. We get some of those stepwise things, and suddenly we're looking at like a totally new technology landscape, and all these things become available to us. And we need to really like hold on to the fact that it's like we're not just going to give everything over to some closed company and just trust that they have our best interests in mind, because we've been screwed over time and time and again by these companies who have not had our best interests in mind, even though they tell us they might, right? The whole like Google do no evil thing. They said that and then they didn't do that. So why would we trust them again? Why would we trust them to like put glasses on our face and have cameras and microphones everywhere? I heard recently that there's like this open source project I need to go look into, where somebody put on glasses and they were just walking around. I don't know if it's open source, but you put on glasses and walk around and it can identify anybody based on just like stuff that's been posted online. Wow. And it's not from Meta, it's not from anybody. It's just like some dude building that using publicly available stuff already. So that stuff is coming. The thing that I'm wondering about, like on a philosophical level, is what does that do to our brains, right? You talk about not remembering someone's name. And so before technology, what that would look like is you have this like slightly awkward conversation where you're like, oh man, I don't remember your name. Or you say a wrong name and they're like, whoa, that's not my name. Or even worse is they go along with it. And then 3 days later, you find out that wasn't their name and they're just being polite. But right. So like there's all these different social faux pas that causes you in the future to be like, okay, if I don't want to have that awkward moment again, I need to start like working harder with my brain to remember things. Well, if suddenly AI is just like remembering it for us and it's like throwing up in our faces, is that going to cause our brains to atrophy? Or does that just free up brain resources to be doing like other stuff all the time? It's like, I don't even remember that person's name because it'll come to me in the moment that I need it. There's this concept in software engineering called lazy loading, where you have all these memory properties, all these variables that are defined, but you don't actually fill them up. So you're not consuming RAM on the computer. You load it into RAM, you load that stuff into the variable at the moment that is needed. So I look at like these AI technology things that you're talking about, heads up display, cameras, microphones, things in our ears, is they could allow us to kind of lazy load all of this data, all this trivial stuff that we shouldn't be burdening our minds with all the time. And that could allow us to be deeper thinkers, maybe thinking more critically, maybe doing other things. But I'm not a brain scientist. And what I don't understand is, does that actually cause problems? Like, do we need to have these like memory things, these memorization things that we do all the time to help us to be able to think critically? Because part of the input of all that critical thinking are all of these random data points that we have that we've been gathering throughout our lives. So I would love to like put a pause on what I'm doing and go study that for the next 20 years and like really go deep on that. I think that would be super fascinating. I don't have two of me, so I can't do that in two lives, but yes, maybe I'd be curious your thoughts. Like, do you think that is a net positive or a net negative for us to be depending more on this technology to remember stuff? And like, what impact does that have on our brain?
Yeah, that lazy loading thing, like that's an analogy that really hits home, because when you free up all of these spaces that are just like random facts that you need to go about your day, it does theoretically should give you more brain power. But the other analogy that I think about is like when I try and sit down and read a book, and every day I try and at least read a chapter. Not perfect about it, but I try and do it just because like I doom scroll plenty, and I know it's not good, right?
Yeah.
But it's like there's no resistance to getting the dopamine of doom scrolling, and that goes for TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. It doesn't matter the platform. You open your little magical glass device that we all carry in our pockets, and you start scrolling, and it's immediate dopamine drip. And I notice when I'm reading a book, like when I get into it, you love it, it's great, it's amazing. But there's that resistance that you have to like climb that hump to get the dopamine dripping, and then you're into it. But trying to climb that hump is challenging the more, if like, especially if you just wake up and start doom scrolling, it's so much harder to have that focus and to like lock into it. So I suspect it'll kind of, to your point, I think it'll just be, how people treat their minds. Are they exercising? Are they moving? Are they eating the right foods? Are they, being cognizant about how much they doom scroll? Because I think, that freed up resources in your brain, that lazy loading, it could go towards higher order thinking, thinking through hard problems, challenging yourself, quote unquote, doing stuff that you deem to be good. I mean, I'm not saying social media scrolling is bad per se, but I don't think it really pushes the needle forward for humanity. It's just kind of, some cheap dopamine. So I think it's going to really tie into the person and how they use it. And I do like the idea of, freeing up some of those resources so you can think more creatively. But I also think, we could free up those resources and then we just use it to play video games.
Yeah.
I mean, I love video games. I'm not bad talking video games, but I think what you focus on, where you draw your attention is going to make such a difference. And I do suspect too, there will be a lot of people who they get those resources freed up and then rather than using them for good. I mean, even in my own life, I do think, if I get all those variables freed up, I need to use it for better things rather than just going online and doom scrolling more because I don't have to remember the names of my relatives.
Yeah, no, for sure. Or like not even just doom scrolling, but like to talk about that AI generated video content. Someday, like TikTok might not even be people posting it. It's just going to be like, I'm going to go on there and just swipe through AI generated 6-second videos or 30-second videos that are just tailored to me. And it's like, okay, so are we getting all this convenience with all of the cool technology so we don't have to remember stuff? And then, yeah, are we just spending our time consuming garbage? And or can we actually use that for productive things? That's the difficult thing.
Yeah, there was a show, and I can't remember it, but it was just like, it was so profound when I saw it, and this guy had a heads-up display, and he had all these little circles in the heads-up display, and it was like, literally, I think the average person in the show had like 3 or 4. This dude had like 20 of them, and when they took him away and he didn't have that stimulation, the guy literally had a seizure. And, on the one hand, it's like, well, man, I mean, think about the context switching that guy can do, and usually when you're context switching like that, it's like a huge load on your brain, and it's hard to focus. But if we get to that point where the heads-up display has like 20 different things going, and I mean, to have the attention to like, filter through the 20 different feed things, but then if you take them away, I mean, it's like we're changing, like I think Grimes was the one who said like we're changing from Homo sapiens to Homo techno or whatever the term was that she used. And, I think she said it kind of tongue in cheek, but I think it was actually really a profound point where, we are not the same as our ancestors. If you showed someone 100 years ago what we're doing now, where like to the average person today, it just seems normal to hop on a video call and to be able to chat from someone in a totally different place, hundreds, thousands of miles away. But you showed this to someone in the past, and I mean, it's literally magic. They'd be like, what is this like crystal ball? What is this mirror you have?
You're like touching your computer, like, oh, is he in the computer? What's going on?
Yeah, exactly. Future generations, they're going to be, the technologies they're going to have, I'm sure, are going to blow our mind. And it's just going to, I mean, I think it does kind of make, you're still a human, but it's not the same type of human as someone 100 years ago. And we're going to see the same thing in 100 years, maybe 10 years. I mean, AI is moving pretty fast, right? We're bad at estimating exponential curves. So I guess the exciting thing is we'll get to live through some of this stuff.
Yeah. And our physical bodies evolved over millions of years. And then this technology is evolving over millions of seconds. And it's like this crazy smash that's happening between these two paradigms, for lack of a better word. But these two things that like our physical bodies don't want to evolve as quickly as technology is kind of forcing us to. And that's why we're seeing so many problems with social media and other technologies as they come out.
Yeah, no, that's well said. I was having this conversation with my boss yesterday, and it's just like mind-blowing how quickly, we evolved to, if you got rejected by your tribe, you were dead, right? Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden, like, cyberbullying is a real thing. And I'm always reminded of that Tyler, the Creator tweet where it was like, just close your eyes. What are you doing? It's not a big deal. But I think on the flip side of that, in our biology, it's like, yes, if you get rejected online, it's not the end of the world. You're going to survive. You're going to be okay. But, we've evolved to this thing where, like, in the past, if you were rejected from your tribe, you were dead. So, those emotions, those things you feel are totally valid, because even though it's online and it's not actually going to kill you, there's like a biological thing in us that's like, oh man, this is bad. Like, you start freaking out. And I think it's hard for our biology to keep up with how fast these technologies are moving. And, you breathe, right? There's different things you can do. I don't want to say go talk to an AI, go talk to an actual person about it.
Yeah, talk to a real person. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's just hard for our body to keep up with the pace of change. And I almost wonder if like the upcoming generation, like my children have always grown up with FaceTime, and they can FaceTime their grandparents that live in a different state, and they can just see them instantly. But, is that going to make it easier for them? Like, I do fear, I think the younger generations will be fine with AI displacing job. It's the older generations, back in the day, they said, learn to code. Sorry, you lost your blue collar job, learn to code. Mm-hmm. Now it's like, is learning to code really valuable when AI is going to be writing 99% of the software? For some people, maybe, but yeah, it's I think that I guess the point is I think the earlier, the younger generations will have a much easier time adapting to these new technologies than older generations who grew up without them, and it's like completely foreign to them.
Yeah. No, the new one is learn to weld. So start learning how to weld.
How the tables have turned.
Yeah, I'm sorry that you can't like send 100 emails a day to like different organizations within your company. Learn to weld. Yeah, no, that, I'm being silly here, everybody. Don't roast me over it. But yeah, no, it's been great, man.
It has. One more thing I'd like to ask about before we hop off here. What do you think will be, if people using retro technologies? There's like a real joy, like a visceral nostalgia you get to them. So as AI progresses and we get all these wearables and we get the things we've discussed, what do you think would be the technologies that like people really enjoy and cherish, and those retro technologies that they want to use?
Ooh, that's a great question. The first thing that comes to mind is paper. I always wonder, is it because I grew up this way? But like, I love a physical book. I have a Kindle. I have ways to read things electronically, but I always come back to just a physical book. I love that medium. I love like being able to hold it. I love knowing where the words are on the page and like flip back and forth. And it's like my mind can remember this like really profound thing that I read. It was on the bottom half of the left side of this page, right? And so I have like this spatial awareness of it. And that is completely lost when it's digital. So I always wonder, if I grew up now, if I was born today, consuming everything digitally, would my brain like be trained slightly different to where a paper book would feel very weird? And I don't know the answer to that. But like, I think that might be a medium that people will miss. And maybe you have this thing where like people are printing up conversations they had with people, or they have AI generate something and then print a book for them, and they'll have something in their house that can make it for them. Some kind of combination 3D printer thing. But it's like, I don't know. I feel like that might be a retro technology that just can't go away.
Yeah,
That's mine.
That's a great one. I mean, I think about email and actually writing out a physical letter. And, if someone writes a follow-up thank you email, it's nice, right? But like, whatever, look at it, next thing immediately. Whereas like, even in my own personal life, if I'm writing like a letter to someone, I do put a lot more thought into it when I'm actually moving my hand on the paper, thinking about it. And it's just a nice thing to get. I mean, when I receive a physical letter, it's so much nicer than receiving an email. And on the one hand, email promised us all of this. I mean, it does make it easier to communicate. But on the flip side, now most of us are chronically online and constantly having to receive these notifications, and there are negative effects. And I think those Lindy things will be very powerful. I mean, I'm super bullish on AI. I like it. I use it all the time. It's great. But I think there's definitely a ton of value in those Lindy, those old technologies that we use day to day. So
Yeah.
I hope people think about those things, and especially in developing AI too. I mean, these frontier labs, if anyone's listening, please, think through those things. And I think they're good for humanity, and they've stuck around for a long time. So we shouldn't get rid of all the stuff of the past just because we have these new, exciting, promising technologies.
Yeah, no, it's true. And like you're dealing with email and written letters, it kind of changed expectations. And I think that's where some of this anxiety comes from in all the technologies that we have. That suddenly I know that if I send you an email, like you have the ability to read it. You probably got a push notification. I don't recommend people do that. Turn off your notifications for email, but some people do. So maybe you got a notification. So it's like I send it and I'm like, oh, he should respond to me really soon. Whereas if I hand wrote you a letter and I was living in England and I had to go across a boat and then like on a Pony Express across country, like I know you're not going to get it for a few weeks, and maybe you never get it because the person died trying to deliver it. So it totally changes things. And it's like, I kind of would love to go back to the day where it's like we're sending letters to each other and I know that they have to go to the mailbox and get it. So it's only gonna be once a day. It's not gonna get delivered on the weekends. And it just kind of slows life down a little bit. And you're more thoughtful. You're more thoughtful with what you're writing. You're more intentional with what you're doing. And you know that you don't need it right away. And so I think in email, like this is the original slop, right? We slopped a bunch of email out, yeah?
It's why Adam Back made proof of work, right? He literally made proof of work.
Yeah, and it's not just the spam, but it's like I'm sending emails that maybe I would be more thoughtful if I was writing a letter and like work through problems first before I fired off this email. So yeah, be more intentional with everything you do in life, I guess, is the takeaway there.
Yeah, and to the younger generations, if you're still looking for a wife, I think the bar is low. Most people are texting. Call that girl or write her a letter. Knock on her door. Don't just text her, I'm here. Go and knock on the door. And doing those simple things that to people, 20 years ago were just normal. I think now you can really stand out and be in the 1% and really make a positive impact on someone's life, which I mean, it's kind of like, man, the bar's so low, but at the same time, I think that makes a huge difference. So good thing to keep in mind.
Yep.
Well, to anyone
Yeah,
tuned in, thank you so much for listening. And Mark, if you just want to give a handoff, I highly recommend people check out trymaple.ai. Like you said, add it as a tool in your toolbox. If you're going over your taxes or sensitive information, I think you should either run it locally or use a private AI like trymaple.ai. But yeah, if you just want to give a handoff to the audience.
Yeah, sure. Everybody's got ChatGPT and Grok on their phones, and they all use them. So I'm not telling you to get rid of those. Just download Maple, go to your favorite app store, search up Maple AI. It's got this green leaf, and download that, put it on your phone, and use it. I had a friend who was getting evicted from his apartment, and so he took his rental contract, threw it into Maple, and was able to be like, all right, the landlord is telling me this. What are they contractually obligated to? What is my recourse I can do? I don't recommend people do that in ChatGPT because that has all sorts of ramifications where that could be used against you in court later on if the landlord came and sued you and it's like, oh, they were trying to get around things. So chat with it in Maple. It's totally private and unencrypted. If you want to follow what I do, I'm on X. It's at Mark Suman, and then I'm on Nostr as well. You can go to marks@primal.net, find me through that way. And then, yeah, just recommend people try to use open source tools, find ways to be more open and verifiable in the technology that you use.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mark, for coming on, and to anyone who listened, cheers. Have a good one, guys.
See ya.